Hi, I'm Max, and you're watching Progress Isn't Radical. In today's episode, we're talking about how horribly the economy will handle the policy of removing millions of undocumented immigrants who will be impacted by these policies and don't think you're safe just because you're here on a visa, are a permanent resident, or even if you were born in the United States. Lastly, we'll cover how Trump might go about deporting these people and the spotty laws from the 1700s that he would try to use to justify his actions. Let's talk about how much money it takes to take care of undocumented immigrants. States like Texas, Arizona, and Florida constantly whine about how much it costs. So what is actually the truth? The truth of the matter is that states which complain the most about supporting these people are the states which take more federal dollars than what they put in. Why am I mentioning this? It's due to the great irony that in 2022, undocumented immigrants paid over $100 billion into our tax system, which includes $50 billion in federal, $30 billion in state, and $30 billion in Social Security and Medicare, which, by the way, they can't benefit from in any way. While the radical right complains about taking care of undocumented people, it's ironically amusing that the immigrants are contributing a net positive, while the repugnant Republicans simply take. How do we know that it doesn't cost more to support undocumented people than what they put in? Because Texas told us so. In 2005, Texas funded an independent study in order to justify their desire to get rid of good, hardworking individuals. What did the study discover? Well, at the time, undocumented Texans produced about $1.6 billion in state revenues collected from taxes and other sources. On the flip side, these very same people only used $1.2 billion in state services, such as public education and hospital care. This is of course not mentioning what they pay into the federal system, which Texas got back in abundance. In fact, not only did undocumented Texans pay more into the system, they also contributed to nearly $18 billion in gross domestic product, which is the measure of the value of goods produced in Texas. Is it a wonder that Texas, nor any other state which complains about their undocumented, haven't done another study since? Republicans are uncomfortable with facts, which is why they want to try and shift the blame of their trickle-down failure from their horrible economic policies onto people who don't have a voice. In the same way that Texas Governor Greg Abbott immorally tricked people onto buses and then sent them to blue sanctuary cities to try and make some kind of point. The only point which was made, these cities took care of these people, supported them, and integrated them into their communities. You see, Republicans don't see undocumented immigrants as people, which is why they feel so comfortable calling all of them criminals and abusers of public resources. By the way, Governor Abbott has spent over $150 million tricking people out of the state. That's hilarious, since not only is that an immense waste of money, but that in the long run, the state is losing economic power. Now let's talk about the real elephant in the room. Undocumented immigrants make up a substantial part of our economic system. 2/3 of these people are young, between the ages of 25 and 54, and that's important because while many developed European and Asian nations are declining in population, immigrants help the United States keep growing in power through economic means. Simply put, more consumers equals a stronger economy for the United States, which in turn is used to extend American influence through soft and hard power. While undocumented immigrants represent 5% of the entire workforce, they also are almost half of all agricultural workers and housekeepers, and 15% of all construction workers. This is important, particularly due to Trump's promise of tariffs on Mexico, which produces about half of America's fresh vegetables, fruit, and nuts. Meaning that if Trump does deport these hard workers, you will see an even bigger spike in food prices. Since now these farms need to either find another source of cheap labor, pay more to Americans, or, more likely, close down due to being unprofitable. If an army marches on its stomach, America functions due to cheap labor from immigrants. This is not to mention a dramatic increase in construction costs, which is already a problem since we don't have enough housing as it is. Remember how Texas wasted $150 million from earlier? That was barely 100,000 people using one of the cheapest means of transportation who didn't need anything outside of a ticket. Can you just imagine the cost of trying to move over 13 million people across the continent? They would have to scour everywhere from Alaska to Miami and New Hampshire to San Diego. It's estimated that this sort of hunt would take at least a decade. This, of course, assuming that no more people cross our border. Ultimately, it's estimated that the hunt would cost at least $1 trillion. Why would it cost that much? Not only finding these people will be expensive, but so will court proceedings, sustenance, housing, and transportation to country of origin. Can you imagine what we could do with $1 trillion? We can repay every single person's college loans. We could begin universal health care, or just pay down our national deficit. You know, the one which Republicans keep screaming about? Yeah, here they are, happily destroying our economy while spending even more money, which we don't have, on useless projects which won't succeed. I think that when the GOP talks about government being inefficient, it's because they've only seen other Republicans try to govern, rather than true legislators. Speaking of destroying our economy, mass deportation will lead to negative economic growth, ironically increased unemployment, and even higher inflation. In an analysis by the Peterson Institute for International Economics, the organization found that if Trump deported just 1 million people, that the national GDP would drop 1.2% and unemployment would go up by 1.1%. Why is that? Because we've already seen that undocumented immigrants pay into the system more than they get back. They buy things and they use things. It seems weird that unemployment would go up, right? With so many people removed from the economic ecosystem, you would think unemployment would go down. Well, Americans not only don't want to do the jobs those immigrants do, but they would also demand a higher salary for the same work, meaning that businesses will close down due to being unable to keep margins, which will then lead to higher unemployment. This is, of course, if just a small number of people were forcibly relocated back to their country of origin. In a more extreme scenario where Trump deports about 8 million people, which is roughly half of the people in the United States without status, the GDP will drop by 7.5% and unemployment will go up by 6.7% by 2028. Keep in mind that a healthy GDP growth rate for the United States is between 2 and 3%. If these deportations were to happen, it means that the United States may not grow economically at all while having unemployment rates nearly triple of what we have today. This would certainly begin another Great Recession reminiscent of 2008. In 4 years, you'll be looking back and saying, yes, I was better off before a second Trump term. Part of why you would say that is because Trump has recently said that in his first day in office that he would, and I quote, sign a revocation of the 14th Amendment, which guarantees birthright citizenship, meaning that whoever you are watching this, you could also be in the chopping block, regardless of where you were born. Of course, Trump is going to stop there, right? After all, he's only going to be dictator for a day, and just like every other authoritarian strongman, he's going to give up his power, right? In fact, another thing Trump has in common with petty warlords is his plan on using the military in order to remove anyone he doesn't think should be in the United States. Your legal status be damned. How did you think he was going to go about finding, organizing, and removing over 13 million people? Local police forces don't answer to the federal government, and even if a state pushed PDs to cooperate, it's doubtful local police have the manpower necessary for these sort of operations without compromising other responsibilities. The military is banned from being involved in civilian affairs by the Paz Comitatus Act, but the Department of Justice concluded that the Constitution gives the President inherent powers to unilaterally deploy the military for law enforcement in some specific circumstances, such as protection of federal property. That said, the Constitution gives no such permission. He will most likely declare a national emergency, which gives the federal government powers which it traditionally does not have. Though legally, the said emergency has to be ratified by Congress within 30 days of a declaration. So will the House Republicans do so? Only time will tell. When not relying on shady tactics, Trump will be looking to bring back a law from the 1700s. The Alien Enemies Act of 1798 empowers the president to detain and deport non-citizens in times of declared war. Think of World War II, when the Japanese attacked the United States. Do you remember what happened then? Well, this law was used during that time as well for a darker portion of our history, Japanese internment camps. This is because the Alien Enemies Act of 1798 lacks due process of the law and with some legal mumbo-jumbo allows the detainment of citizens as well. Just like what happened in 1942 when Japanese citizens were swept into the concentration camps right along with non-citizens. You might say, that could never happen to me, but this has already happened in our past, and Trump is saying that he's going to throw people out of the country regardless of their status. Not only has he threatened birthright citizenship, but he has said in his own words on Meet the Press, I don't want to be breaking up families, so the only way you don't break up family is you keep them together and you have to send them all back. That's right, he's already promising to send back entire families regardless of their status. What's next? If you live with an undocumented immigrant, are you also going to be sent out of the country? I don't think even Trump knows where he will stop his madness. Now, to be fair, Trump did say that he was going to deport the most violent of the undocumented first. But I have a question about that. How does he know who is the most violent if they are, in fact, undocumented? And if all of this wasn't enough, the party which claims to represent small government is telling states and sanctuary cities that they need to get out of the way. Yes, the federal government is already threatening states and cities. Tom Homan, the man responsible for throwing children into cages last Trump term, and the so-called border czar, which is not an official position in any way, said in a Fox interview, "If you have a governor who says, 'I'm not going to cooperate, I'm going to block you,' well then, federal funds should be slashed to that state, and I mean hugely so that people of that state understand that the governor's responsible party, that's going to happen, I guarantee you." That's right, an unelected, unappointed, and unofficial plain citizen, just like you and me, Tom Homan is guaranteeing that states' federal funds will be slashed. I thought Trump was supposed to be getting rid of the swamp, yet it appears he has simply dragged in another thug. These deportations are an extremely serious matter which will impact every single American. Prices for everything will go up, food shortages will appear out of COVID, unemployment will skyrocket, and our economy will go into freefall. If that wasn't bad enough, no one is safe. Trump has promised to end birthright citizenship, tied to some of America's darkest times, and is already saying that he'll be deporting citizens. I don't want to be an alarmist, but this is textbook petty warlord behavior. Separate people into groups, turn them against each other, and then systematically begin removing undesirables with the military, regardless of their rights. When this begins happening, do not sit idly by. Whether you are in a blue city in a red ocean or you're living in a liberal state, protest against this thuggish behavior in every way possible. Speak up in your workplaces. Don't stand for lying while dining in restaurants and bars. Inform your family and friends, and reach out to your federal elected officials on a constant basis, because your very freedom might depend on it. So what do you think? Does Trump have the right to deport citizens as he clearly wants to? Will he be able to utilize the military against American citizens? Or will enough voices be able to drown out his hatred so that he's blocked from accomplishing his goals? Please comment below with your thoughts, subscribe, like, and always remember, progress isn't radical.